Well, it is Wednesday, which means additional thoughts for Big Fish Theory by Vince Staples. And, some weeks are interesting with the albums I spend time with because sometimes I have time to take notes and watch videos and interviews, and other times I don't have time to do anything. I just listen to it a couple times. I try and get it on the commute, maybe a little bit at work if I'm at my desk for a bit. So the experience can vary from week to week depending on what's going on. And sometimes I come into a Wednesday night thinking to myself, I don't know what to say. So sometimes I have to just kind of, try and conjure something on the spot. As you guys know, I don't do any cuts here. It's just one take, and whatever it is what it is. And this week with Big Fish Theory, all the way up until about 10 minutes ago, I've been wrestling with this feeling of what this album is. Because there is this just feeling, and it's difficult to describe, and it just popped into my head right before as I was setting up, actually, to make this, and it kind of hit. And the idea being, in the movie Scarface, and for those of you who have not seen Scarface, please watch Scarface. You got to watch that. It's a great movie. It's a little long, but it's a great movie. For those who have not seen it, it's Al Pacino. He's this Cuban immigrant, and he makes his way up through the crime ladder, becomes this drug dealer, murderer, all this other stuff, right? And at the end of the film, he's made it. He's successful. He has money. He's still not happy because being a drug dealer is obviously a very stressful life. But there's this scene where they're at this fancy restaurant, and he's sitting down. He's got a suit on, and his buddy's there. He's wearing a suit, and his wife is there, and she's wearing this just like drop dead gorgeous, gown, and barely wearing any clothes, basically. And his buddy's going on and on about this and that, and his wife is all coked out, isn't hungry, doesn't want to eat the food that she ordered, and Tony's sitting there, Al Pacino's character, and he just starts going, "Is this it? Is this what it was all about? All of the fucking, the money and the drugs and the women and he just starts going on and on about all the crap that he went through to get to this, where I'm sitting in a restaurant spending all this money on food my coked out wife won't eat, while my buddy chews my ear off about the big important thing that we have to worry about next." And he's basically saying, I've made it. He doesn't say this in the film, but the point being, he's made it and he hates it. Like all this stress, all this torture, all these things that he's gone through for this. And that scene, to me, is kind of like the cinematic version of what Big Fish Theory is in terms of music. And this is such a cool project. I went back and forth on it so many times because there's so many things about it where I feel like I shouldn't like it. Especially recently with my praising so much of The Roots and Things Fall Apart, and that album being the best produced album I've heard. I still hold to that in terms of my personal taste. I just think it's perfect. I think it's flawless. The production on this album is incredible too. Lots of praise for Sophie, rightfully so, but I think across the board, all of the producers on this album did a great job. From top to bottom, every track has a heart for me. Every track, except for the little Ramona Park thing, which is a 50-second skit, right? But the concept that exists with it, this feeling, and I cannot get over how important Alyssa Interlude is. That track 3, that just dark, kind of panicky, moody, reflective song, and it being track 3, I feel like is so important, because from there, that song is almost like a bullet wound in the chest. And it's got that tapping, right? That just like kind of anxiety level tapping, and that low level bass. It's just anxiety. And it just feels like this core of sickness, this core of unhappiness that then kind of bleeds out for the rest of the album. And when it ends on Rain Come Down, you kind of go through these, love can be so disheartening, as we know. 745, he's just like, he's out on a date with a woman that hates him. He doesn't even really like her that much. It's got this dark vibe to it. There's this great comment, I think it was on YouTube. The guy said, 745 is his all-time nighttime vibe drive track. I was like, fuck yeah, man. Ramona Park, that little skit, you know, just this whole idea of if I would die tomorrow, would anybody in New York even know? And just all of the weird layers that exist within that concept of being in a gang that is named after something that's associated with New York, and how New York's on the other side of the country. Nobody knows who he is. There's just so many weird elements to that, and it's fantastic. And then you get into Yeah Right, which is great. It's kind of fucking, I feel like it's just sarcastic. Just yeah right, yeah right, yeah right, yeah. The whole tone. Homage, I think, is still my favorite. I love the bass in that chorus. What's interesting is it sounded amazing on my headphones when I was blasting them, but it doesn't really quite as hard in my car or on my speakers, but I just love that track. I think it's still my favorite. Party People, Bag Back, Rain Come Down. I mean, when I try and visualize what this album is, I think of the scene from Scarface in the restaurant. And you can just watch that scene too if you want to see the whole movie. Watch the whole movie though, because that scene is towards the end, and you have all the context of what he's pondering while he's saying these things. But it does just feel like this is Alyssa interlude, this whole focus on someone who is no longer there, that he didn't protect. There's a sound of panic. There's a gloominess to it. I want the rain. It just feels like some sort of gunshot at the core. And then the rest of the album after that just feels like, fuck this. This is not what I worked for. I don't care about any of this shit. I don't care about being famous. I don't care about doing what I'm supposed to do. You know, I'm only going to, if I'm going to talk to you, it's going to be $10,000 in fees. And I just, there's all this shit. It seems to be like just in general rejection of the position he's in at the time, which from what I understand, he was really big leading up to this, and he was struggling with the audiences that he was seeing at these festivals because they weren't his people. They weren't who he was trying to reach, type of thing. And so I just get this feel of, fuck, is this it? Did I survive all the shit I survived so that I could be here, so I could have money and women who are trying to use me for my money and they don't love me, and the one person I care about is no longer here, and I wish it would rain. Like, it's just interesting, really interesting. And then I started thinking about the name of the album itself, The Big Fish Theory, and how, I don't remember where I read it, but basically it was named after the Big Fish Theory, which was something his dad shared with him when they had this talk. And apparently Vince Staples has never revealed what it was exactly that his dad said. But we can imply that since he won't share what was said, that it probably was not the standard big fish theory that we know of, you know, there's always a bigger fish in the sea, perhaps, or the concept of, you know, a fish only grows as big as a tank will allow it, or something to that effect, or, you know, maybe being the biggest fish in the smallest pond doesn't mean you're a big fish at all. So then I started exploring that idea. You know, what is the big fish theory in the context of this album and the moods that are being shared? And I started to think about the photo that was on, I think it was track 2, Big Fish, on the Genius annotations. There's just that photo of that fish that's basically stuck in a tank that's barely bigger than the fish is. And I started thinking about an individual who comes from a background like Vince does, with his parents are both gang members, probably grew up in poverty, you know, drug fiends banging on the side door like on Hell Can Wait. All these different things. And the idea of a person's potential and a person maximizing, like there's two different things, right? There's our potential, what we could all do if we put our minds to it and we really try. And then there's like the best that we've done, right? Like for example, the farthest I've ever gone running is 6 miles. That's the farthest I've ever ran. I try to do a 3-mile run. Sometimes I get a little rambunctious and I do a 4.5-mile run. But the farthest I've ever run is 6 miles. Now, that's obviously not the farthest I could run. If I trained and I practiced and all this, I could run much farther than that, right? But that's the farthest I've ever gone. And I just started thinking about limitations and how all of us in some way, we've experienced it, whether we think about it or not, a limitation. Like the furthest we've ever, the best we've ever done at something. And I start thinking about Vince Staples and this, what if the big fish theory is this idea of, what if this is the best I can do? What if me as an artist, after all this struggle and all the things, what if the best I can do is create music that only draws these types of people to festivals? What if the best I can do leads me to a place in my life where I'm unhappy? You know? I don't know. There's just lots of different thoughts that have been evoked by this album. And I kind of really fucking love it, honestly. And it's strange because, again, I say that and I think to myself, I shouldn't, in a sense. Like, there are elements of this album where if I compare them to other albums that I've loved, I think the other albums clear this one. But there's just something about it. I think it helps that it's shorter. 36 minutes, you can throw it on, it's quick. And there's just this vibe that runs throughout it. Cool experience. Very cool experience. And I honestly, I really do believe that the keystone to the album, for me anyway, the most important track is Alyssa Interlude. If you don't have that sound, if you don't have this one song where Vince is talking about this person that went away, that's no longer here, that he should have protected, vague yet somewhat descriptive, kind of lets you know something happened, but not exactly what. I don't know how the rest of the album feels without that, especially with it being track 3. And then concluding it with Rain Come Down and just the concept of the little theme of rain that plays throughout the album too. It's really fascinating. It's really fascinating. And the fact that the production's so different from other music. I like that it's got an electronic sound. It's got this sarcastic, darker, give a fuck feel throughout the album. Yeah. Really interesting. I'm very glad I did this one. And while this might not be the best video in terms of like description as to, different lyrics and tracks or why certain tracks are better than others or whatever, I don't know. There's just this indescribable feel for me that goes through the whole thing. And every time I've listened to it, I get it. I'm on that little stream of emotion that starts from the beginning, crabs in a bucket, and goes all the way to Rain Come Down. So there you go. There will be no Buog tomorrow. It is week 4, so it's my week off. I am going to do my album review for the winter. That will be tomorrow. And then Friday, last I looked, Yeet is getting crushed in the poll by SZA and SOS. And the third option, which was, why haven't you reacted to insert your favorite album? So no chance for Yeet, I think, on Friday, but you never know. Maybe the bots will jump on and change everything. I'll call up the the Russian bot farms and say, hey, throw a couple thousand votes for Yeet. It's only like 5 cents a vote. It's super cheap, the bot farms. There you go. I really like Big Fish Theory. It's really interesting. There's just something about it, man. And yeah, we'll see you guys on Friday.